Welcome to the China EVs and More podcast. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. So feel free to post them into X, LinkedIn, or YouTube. In the next hour or so, my co host, Lei Xing, a Boston based Lei Xing, will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners and viewers, welcome back. We ask that you smash those subscribe and like buttons so you don't miss anything from us in the future. I'm confident that Lei and I are two of the most knowledgeable people in the world doing this. So help us get the word out to others about this show. My name is Tu Lee. I'm the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Good morning, live from Boston, where my daughter is playing this volleyball tournament. So I'm at this location, the Seaport District. So you might hear airplanes taking off in the background. But this is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 197. We continue with the fireworks that have come out of China in terms of price cut or non-price cut price cut following the January EV sales numbers. Fireworks on this side of the world in terms of tariffs back and forth. Uh, so lots of things happening as China moves out of the Spring Festival break into, let's say, um China celebrates everything. China celebrates the first day of Spring Festival and the eighth day of Spring Festival, which is the day you return work. And the term we say is 开工大吉, which means uh, auspicious start to the working, back to work. Uh, and the fireworks, boom, right? Xpeng comes out with a zero down, zero down. I want to emphasize that. Zero down 5 year, zero interest financing for the X9.
Well, let's rewind because it was Neo that started the
Well,
2025 price war with 20% down, 0% financing, and then Xpeng one up them with zero down, and then
yeah, and now everybody is following suit. So we have Xpeng, and then we have I think Red Flag, one of their new models, did that, and it's happening all over again as we expect, and in a different way. And I think if we had to rank who the culprits are the last 3 years, 26 months, right? We're into the 26th month of this price war that was started in 2023 by Tesla, 2024 by BYD, and 2025. I pick Xpeng because zero down. That's the first time ever. I mean, that's crazy because you virtually get a car and then you start paying it off without interest.
it's free
That's
money.
unheard of. That is unheard of, at least in the US.
And for Xpeng, it's just a continuation of the momentum they've built from last quarter. And we had spoken to Brian Gu about that, and he was very, very bullish on their prospects. So he must have known that they were going to continue to be putting the pressure on the other automakers. And so it's not surprising to see Xpeng in a position of strength now because their product lineup seems to be pretty complementary. And we can't leave out Tesla because they are doing a
Yep.
non-price incentive. Can you tell them about what's going on with Tesla?
So the latest Tesla done was giving you 8,000 RMB worth of $1,200 worth of insurance that you don't have to pay on top of the 5-year zero interest financing that has been available for, I don't know, since the summer, I think, last summer. And then Envo, the latest to join the action, right? Zero
Which is
down.
Neo's
Yes.
brand.
And I think Xpeng, like I tweeted, is putting the metal to the pedal. Very
Pedal to the
offensive.
metal.
Pedal to the metal, or metal to the pedal, whatever. See, my English is still bad. But
One thing to know.
but Envo, it feels like more of a defensive move than Xpeng as an offensive move, because Envo, I think, is under a lot more pressure because they have communicated that they want to do 20,000 in March. And the January numbers, we don't make any conclusions other than that they were lower than December, and we had that shift of the sales champion that Xpeng surpassed Li Auto in the pure.
And Li Auto is shrinking still.
Yeah, but it's January. No.
So the reason Lei brings that up because first of all, it's a week shortened or a few days shortened sales cycle because of Chinese New Year, number one. And number two, after December, there's always a lull because there's a lot of sales pulled into December. And most people aren't really thinking about buying cars in the middle of winter in China. And even so, for sure, the month over month numbers, the December to January, don't pay attention to those. The year over year, I think it's okay because last year, I think Chinese New Year was also in January. I think it's going to be better than the month over month numbers are kind of trash. So don't worry about those numbers.
Well, I don't know. Last year might have been in February.
Is it February?
Yeah, we have to double check. But anyways, anytime start of the year in China, the year on year, the month over month, at least in its first 2 months, are rather irrelevant or not as significant of a benchmark to look at because of the holiday seasonality.
I think as analysts, they're not as significant, but from an OEM standpoint, kind of getting a feel for foot traffic, kind of getting a feel for the beginning of the year, the economy, I think it does help them gauge what the rest of the year is going to be like.
Yeah, and relatively, if we look at Xpeng versus some of the others, BYD, for example, I mean, 300,000 compared to 500,000 in December versus Xpeng, 30,000 compared to 36,000 in December. Right, that's different relatively. So I'd say Xpeng was more resilient compared to BYD. But volume-wise, BYD they're going to run away with the volumes anyways. So.
There could be a chance, especially if Tesla. Your joke last week was 1.79 in 2024. If they hit 1.8 in 25, that's growth. Yeah. But if Tesla doesn't grow in any significant way, BYD is going to outsell them on the BEV side alone in 2025.
Yeah.
Now, let's drill down to Tesla a little bit because, like I said, we're not going to pay attention to the month over month numbers from a sales standpoint, but year over year, Tesla is down 12% in January. But also in California, 2024, Tesla was down year over year. And in January in Europe, and specifically France, Germany and the UK,
It's down big.
UK. So the UK, they were down, I think, 12%, but in Germany and France, they were down significantly, like 40%, 50%. And so let's say some of that is older product, but some of that really has to do with Elon entering European politics for sure. And so these are not insignificant uh, shrink in sales. And I don't know if the refresh Juniper is going to make up for a lot of that, especially if Elon continues to try to be part of the political conversation in Europe. So there's a lot of alarm bells if I'm a Tesla investor going on with just the January numbers.
I mean, the recent days and weeks, it just seems that other than the earnings call about autonomy and uh, the humanoid bot, the rest of the time, you look at his social media activities, nothing on Tesla. Everything on everything on the Doge, on what Trump is doing, on the actions that he's taken since he's gotten to office. I mean, I, I feel like he's almost a forgotten CEO at Tesla. Right?
And I've hung my hat on the fact that as long as the Tesla share price is well over $1 trillion, the market cap is well over $1 trillion, he'll be given a lot of slack from his investor community. But we also have to remember that the three regions that I'd mentioned, the United States, China, those are countries obviously, and Europe are driving the bulk of Tesla's sales. And so in the United States, it's about 30%, China's about 30-ish%. And so the flexibility that he has from a sales standpoint come from those three regions. And I don't know what will, because let's assume that the Juniper gives them a sales bump for a few months. Unless there's more price cuts, I could see end of summer Tesla really scrambling for sales. So,
and then also what happens with the Model Q? Could be something of a story around the Shanghai Auto Show time. That's their home court. I think if it's said that they're on time to launch this thing before the mid 2025, then it's going to launch. And right, reports saying that it's going to be around 150,000 or less than 150,000 to $20,000 dollars. And how that's going to help remains to be seen. Speaking of $20,000, we also heard about the ID1 supposedly coming in 2027 as their version of the Model Q. So
the Volkswagen, you got to know 2027. Even in Western terms now, we know that 2027 is a lifetime away in China, but model year 27 in the United States is forever, especially because there's going to be a cheaper Rivian now. There's going to be a cheaper Lucid, and GM has really begun to kind of hit its stride with the Equinox, the Blazer. Now, all of these products in the United States and Europe still have warts, but the trade barriers, the tariffs still give them an opportunity, especially if the 7500 in the United States stays in place for, let's say, a good part of this year. Okay. And I just don't know what Volkswagen's thinking when they're saying 2027, because that's a lifetime away.
Yeah. And let's talk about tariffs. I mean, speaking of tariffs, right? I think on this side of the world, the North America, within 48 hours, things 180-degree turn, right? From tariffs to no tariffs for at least 30 days until the end of this month, until early March. And then China slapped this 10% extra on U.S. imported vehicles. I say it's a slap on the wrist because it's to the well-being of these foreign automakers, especially American automakers. It's probably insignificant. The same way the 100% EV tariffs on the China EVs is because it's relevant because they're not here. That's kind of my thinking. And it looks like that Trump wanted to talk to Xi, but that hasn't happened yet. So whether are we going to see a similar thing like a pause? No, I don't know, but it shows that Trump, it's not a one-man decision. That there must be advisors behind the scenes negotiating, right?
Well,
They
they're
don't have to do
pulling
it, right?
his
So
his. We know that he likes conflict amongst his team. So there are a number of China hawks, and there are a number of pro-business folks on his team. They must be hashing that out. Number one. Number two, you could argue that there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that said these he almost like negotiated against himself because he said and
well,
threatened tariffs for Mexico and Canada, and then all of a sudden they're taken away. Now, a little bit of background: most luxury or premium OEMs, because if we're thinking about the high displacement vehicles with the 10% tariff imports into China, we're only really talking about when it comes to General Motors, like the Tahoes, the Hummers, the Silverados, and
Yukon, these type of
right.
vehicles, right? Yeah.
And GM doesn't import a lot of those to
No,
begin with. The only real damage that does, if it was to happen, would be to the Germans that still import a lot of the 7 Series, the S-Class vehicles. But by and large, almost every OEM on the affordable vehicles or the 5 Series, the E-Class, they're built locally.
even
So
X5 that was used to be imported from the U.S. to China is now produced in Shenyang, and the GLE, the Mercedes GLE, the next generation
that's in Beijing.
that's going to start production in Beijing, I think, later this year. So
The only exception to that rule is Porsche, and they still export
Porsche, yeah,
every single vehicle. But we've seen that they're struggling too.
yeah,
And for before 2023, every year the Chinese media would ask Porsche when they're going to build domestically. Well, with the sales shrinking so significantly over the last 2 years, it doesn't make sense for them now to build locally in China. Although we saw this week that Lexus is
another
going to be
big story.
building.
Yeah,
Yep.
long
So
overdue.
they are building a Wolfie. A
Wolfie,
Wolfie is a wholly
Wolfie,
owned
foreign,
subsidiary.
wholly owned foreign enterprise. Wolfie. Yeah,
Yes. And so they're taking a page out of Tesla's playbook, and they're actually going to be building it in Shanghai. And it's a factory that's going to be dedicated to EVs, Lexus EVs in the China market. So we can say all we want about the foreign companies feeling like the Chinese government makes it harder. Companies are doubling down on the China market still.
yeah.
Okay, and it there's it's the only country where you get the bang for your buck. Even the United States can't offer up 26 million vehicles in a market. So, and it again, Lexus said 2026, year and a half, it's going to
2027.
be up. Yeah, it's
2027.
up and running,
Yeah.
up and running in a year and a half. So that's pretty slow.
Well, you got to build
And
it.
yeah, well, I guess we're spoiled because Shanghai Giga was less than a year. Okay, so
Yeah, it's not going to be Tesla speed, but a couple of points on Lexus I think are important is that this year is their 20th anniversary of official entry into the Chinese market. So, and they last year, believe it or not, they were the number one selling foreign premium brand in terms of imports only.
Hmm.
All of the vehicles are sold in China or imported, right? 180,000 units. So number one, and number two, uh, I think th- what I see is now it's cool to produce locally, whereas before I think they try to avoid, just like Porsche, right? They try to avoid producing locally because that would damage their kind of the German heritage or the Japanese premium kind of the exclusivity heritage. But now with all these China smart EV startups, with their quality, with the design, with the local talent, with the supply chain, I think Toyota believed it made sense to do it right now, and also strategically putting into Shanghai because they already have that R&D center in Changshu, not too far away, and the local kind of the supply base is pretty mature. So no brainer, I guess. But like like it's one of those better late than never, or too late, too little, too little, too late.
Well,
We'll have to see. But
the factory is forecasted to start production with about 100,000 units of capacity. So it's actually very, very small, very modest. And I would look at them building locally, them building an R&D center. Ford has a design studio in Shanghai. Tesla has a design studio. So a lot of OEMs, foreign OEMs, have really localized because I don't believe they think. I believe that they don't think they could design, engineer a vehicle
yeah,
for the China market from their
yeah,
home market.
yeah,
They need that local talent that is plugged in and understands deeply what the Chinese consumer is looking for, because these are the same people that are designing and engineering these cars are the ones that are buying these cars.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
think this points back to, you know what, China is years ahead in some of some competitive markets, and it's necessary in order to try to put products on the road that Chinese consumers would be attracted to.
and other Japanese automakers, Honda, Nissan, they are already doing that. But the products that have come out, um, I think, have been mediocre at best in terms of maybe the styling point, maybe the specs. The ENP, ENS models, the Ye, right, the Honda Ye series. Nissan has this N7, uh, which they have Chinese tech inside. Momenta, RoboSense lidars, BYD batteries. Um, but to this point, I I haven't seen, I mean, any traction of those models. So that's why I said, it's time will tell
And
whether yeah,
in the challenge for the foreign automakers, even if they build and engineer and design a vehicle that might be critically acclaimed, it gets smothered from the standpoint of it might get a week of positive news in the media, and then
yeah,
a Chinese EV company will smother it with their own announcement, or multiple Chinese EV companies. A good example is the Juniper. There's a lot of excitement about it, and then Neo says, or Anvo says, we're going to sell this cheaply. Xpeng says, we're going to offer you 0%, zero down, 0% financing. And next thing you know, Juniper gets kind of left out, and they only get, whereas in Europe, the Juniper is probably going to get a couple months worth of spotlight. In
yeah.
the United States, they're probably going to get a few months. In
So
China, not even close. Not even close.
yeah, so two of the upcoming Juniper competitors or killers are in fact the Xiaomi U7 and the Xpeng G7. launching right before I think Shanghai Auto Show. So uh, it's tough.
Hopefully, we'll get a sneak peek. Hopefully, we'll get
And,
a sneak peek.
and look what Ambo has done, right? I think right again going back to Ambo, they're a Model Y competitor, and with the battery leasing, it's only 150,000 RMB, and you still have to, you know, put out these financing incentives to drive sales. It's incredible um, how
And
it is.
the one area that I really, for the viewers to kind of keep track of, is with the tariffs now on Chinese goods, it's going to make it even tougher for the Chinese government to export its way out of its economic challenges. And so this is where it's a fine line. Um, Trump is upsetting a lot of U.S. allies. So the Chinese government's going to try to take advantage of that. But at the end of the day, the U.S. consumes so many Chinese goods that a
Yeah,
10% lift is not the end of the world for most of the things that we buy.
yeah,
But when there's already inflation in place and there's an egg shortage. So I'll just give you a quick anecdote. I posted it in this week's newsletter. Waffle House is charging
yeah.
50%, 50 cents on
It,
meals that include eggs. For every egg that they sell to you, they're adding a 50-cent surcharge. So
so speaking of eggs, I shop at Costco, and I used to buy. I always buy those organic Kirkland 2 dozen eggs. They went up from 6.99 to 7.49 to 7.99, and now 9.99 at Costco.
9.99.
9.99 at Costco. Um, so just one example, but
Now the eggs aren't necessarily 100% because of inflation, because there's some chicken
yeah, the
disease
flu,
going around.
but
But
um,
I'll
and
tell you what, Lay, now that we've been moved back for a while, things weren't inflation was never something I thought of when I lived in the United States before. I was younger, didn't have a family, so that's part of it. But the other part is, to think that 2 dozen eggs cost $10, that was years ago. That was unfathomable because
well,
every time in the days pre-COVID, every time my foreign friends would go visit the United States, they would go visit New York, they would go to LA, and they would go to the outlets and they would say they would come back to China and Beijing
yeah,
and be like, everything's so cheap there. We went to the outlet and we just bought so many things, and I don't get that anymore. So
speaking of kind of the relevant economy, the numbers I just tweeted that the Naja 2 has now become the all-time top grossing film in China and also the all-time top grossing film of any market in a single market. The other winner was Star Wars, The Force Awakens, in the U.S. And I was thinking it would be interesting to see the inbound and outbound tourism numbers to see where the Chinese spent their money during Spring Festival break. But I mean, my goodness, $1 billion of box office in 10 days. Uh, I mean, it's one measure, but is that where people are spending the money? I don't know, but but the movie is good, right? Give credit to the movie, but um, and now
normally,
it-
normally we see pictures of the Great Wall, pictures of Tiananmen with just
well, we saw that.
loads and loads of people.
We
So
saw that with the loads of people, but it'll be interesting to see the tourism numbers. And, yeah. But yeah,
Let me see here. Anything else that
still a lot of
is
pressure. And
on your
speaking
mind?
of, we talked about production in China. Lexus, Tesla, and Ford, worth mentioning was that they elevated Sam Wu's
Yeah.
responsibility to cover the international markets group. And remember, Ford said that they actually made money in China. And in fact, Ford China has made money for 6 quarters in a row, believe it or not, since I think the third quarter of 2023, because they've refocused their efforts. And the number I saw was they exported 170,000 vehicles, Ford,
Mm.
from China in 2024 to Southeast Asia, to Africa, to those type of regions. So, you pick your battle, and Ford said, we're going to do that and we're going to make money. Uh,
They made lemonade from lemons. Is effectively what they did.
yeah.
And this is near and dear to my heart, but maybe you can give folks a little bit of history on the Ford China GM saga over the last 10 or 12 years, because I worked at Ford for
Um,
about a year in Shanghai in Lujiazui, while I think Lawler was the Ford China CFO or CEO. Kumar was the head of product development. And
so,
so a lot of the global leadership, I won't say a lot, a number of the global leadership currently at Ford were at China. And it was literally a checkbox that I think needed to happen if you were going to make it into Mahogany Row in Dearborn for Ford. And so after Lawler left, I think it was Dave Schock. But then can you kind of fill in the blanks a little bit up until Sam Wu?
up until, right um, before the pandemic, here's one thing that's interesting to note about Ford in China. I think it was in 2019 that after so many years in China, in 2019, Ford decided to make China a standalone unit. When you were there, Ford China and Ford Asia Pacific competed because of that structure, right? There was a China president, there was an AP president. Sometimes one could be holding both roles. Uh, I mean, it's just one snippet
When I
of,
was there, they had recently moved Asia headquarters from Thailand to China,
yeah.
and
And
it was APA, so it was Asia Pacific, and then Africa was managed out of China.
yeah, yeah.
So
And now the interesting is China takes the leading role for the international markets group. So the other way around. Hope that works. But clearly, China, again, I think you also talked about in the newsletter about China becoming a location for manufacturing for local and export, not for the only for the Chinese, but Tesla, um, GM, Ford, Renault still has some production. Um, uh, so that's looks to be happening, and yeah. But
now, there is a question, Lay. Any news progress on battery swap standard cooperation or competition evolving in China market?
well, we know that NEO is taking a leading role to kind of finalize kind of the national standard. I think that's being under discussion. So we could see something announced this year. That's my expectation. Clearly, they've already shown a third-party OEM model being tested, and so we could also see that happening this year. Um, So I think, and clearly they've shown what 138,000 swaps in a week, the latest number in a
Yep,
day, not a week, a day. Sorry,
a day.
I think for like 10 straight days they've gone over 100,000. But obviously that's because of as the battery network increases and as their park increases, that's supposed to increase. Um, and obviously you have to make it work. And I think the biggest pressure for Li Bin is obviously doubling sales this year and break even next year. I mean that those are the hard and hardcore metrics that we still put a question mark on. Um,
Because he's betting on Onvo to drive a lot of that volume. So
and yeah, although it's only 1 month, January was low, but it's tough, man. It's you know,
it's Neo does a lot of juggling. Li Bin does a lot of juggling, and so the KPIs for Neo um, much more complex than an Xpeng or a Li
yeah,
Auto,
yeah.
um, and so and you see these products from Neo. We've talked about this a lot. They seem really well designed, attractive, and there's still challenges with sales. And part of it is the market and the competitiveness, but there's got to be something else,
I
because
think Neo this year might, from my knowledge and understanding, it could be mirror image to what happened to Expo last year. I think it'll be tough in the first half.
yeah.
Hopefully, it'll be better in the second half. But I think Expo obviously completely different story. Difference a year makes, right? They're just pushing on the gas pedal, electric pedal, whatever. Uh,
And I want to emphasize this to our Western audience. For less than 25,000 US dollars, the China market, you can get something really, really substantial, something that would cost closer to 50,000 in the United States.
I mean,
50,000 US dollars is something you could buy. A, it is unbelievable. The Mona, the value that the Mona, and the value that the Onvo, the value that the SU7 or Su7, the Xiaomi Su7 gives you is, I'm telling you right now, generally speaking, I won't say it costs 2x, but something that costs 30,000 in China might cost $45,000 in the United States.
and this is exactly what Jim Farley said on the earnings call. He touched upon right the Li Auto and the Xiaomi Su7. Funny, he said we want to beat Su7 in a street fight. You can't do it. There's no way. At least now, there's no way. We know he has that skunks. Where,
I really do appreciate Jim Farley acknowledging that there is this outside of the United States and Europe competitor that's a monster. I think it's great, and he's really building awareness that to the West, something we've been doing for several years, and I think we back it up with data, with actually getting behind the wheel, with actually flying over. But he's really
eh,
the first CEO, because Bluma, Mary, they begrudgingly talk about China, but Farley leans into it and he talks about the challenges that they create, and he talks about specific
yeah,
companies and products.
and he's rather one of the more pragmatic CEOs, Western CEOs, automaker CEOs, when it comes to kind of confirming the China competition, right? In the first place, also adapting a pragmatic approach in the Chinese market. Do you make money? Do you try to make money, or do you worry about volumes? I mean, Ford doesn't have significant volumes, not anymore. I don't know what the last year's numbers were for China.
Oh, they had to have been a rounding error. Had to have been a rounding
I mean,
error.
if they exported 170,000 units, let's just double that, 400,000 units in China. I don't know. I could be wrong, but 500,000, you know, is probably what they did in China, including
And I would venture to guess that a decent percentage of those are transit vans. They're not actually passenger vehicles in China.
right, right.
So
So, and also acknowledging that, the US consumers, they do like these big vehicles and they do like these acceleration, which the EREV could provide at the cost point of ICE vehicles. And he did say that it would not be good for Americans like to tow. So the EREVs would not be good for towing. But, right, you kind of explained in the earnings call different products, the use cases that will be good.
and yeah, and I've always acknowledged that it's not a one-to-one fit. Americans have, especially in Michigan, because there's so many lakes, we do have unique use cases, but by and large, a $35,000 value packed electric vehicle would sell like crazy here.
And then on
I
top,
think
you add the zero down, zero financing. I mean, the envelope poster said you pay 99 RMB a day, basically.
which is $15 for those that are wondering.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've put a bid in yet, because I'm pretty much done. I'm looking at my newsletter this week. I think I posted some pictures of our visit to Faraday Future, because on this week on Bring a Trailer, the vehicle secondary vehicle used car website, there's a Faraday Future FF91 for sale.
Yeah.
And
Hey,
it's stickered at $309,000.
Canoo, Fisker, now Nikola is planning to file bankruptcy, and FF still remains. I mean, you got to give props to YT Jia for
I have no idea how
keeping
that
the
is.
ship afloat. So,
and then let's see here. Some housekeeping here. My friend Mike Colias, deputy bureau chief for Detroit and autos at the Wall Street Journal, he launched
new book.
A book called Inevitable. Haven't read it yet, but I do have it. It's right here. Went to his book signing.
Well, it's called Inevitable.
Yeah, Inevitable. So for those that are wondering what the latest electric vehicle book is, there's one specific chapter on China that let's just say I gave him some background on, and but I'm looking forward to reading it. And what else here? Oh, there's an article in this week's newsletter that I point to, Keith Bradsher, which is the New York Times Beijing bureau chief. He writes some really thoughtful pieces on the China market. He's an old China hand, been there forever. I don't think he's ever going to leave. And wrote about how the Chinese government isn't likely to go extreme on responses and retaliation because of some of the challenges to the domestic.
Yeah, we saw that. We've seen it.
Economy.
That's why I said it's kind of a slap on the wrist, right?
And so for those that are trying to get a better understanding of what drives some of the decision making from the Chinese government, I think it's a pretty thoughtful piece. And the last question, SPX, thanks guys. CATL also pushing different swap standard, or are they all compatible?
Well,
CATL is building different, but if NIO and CATL could sit down and agree on something, I think it would drive a lot of adoption.
So CATL put out this video of Robin Zeng holding 2025. The year is 2025, and it so happens their standard battery packs are numbered 20 and 25. So that was interesting. And they call it the chocolate, right? The choco
Yep.
packs. So they're like, have a chocolate, 2025. So that was cheesy.
So they have a huge role to play in swapping. They supply Neo, and for Neo, it's a bit of a power play because it's their standard that they're trying to not force, but convince other OEMs to adopt. It's almost like Huawei and their HEMA group of OEMs, because it's if there's a standard swapping system, it takes away one thing that can differentiate your product. So if I am a part of the HEMA group for Huawei, and Ley Motor Company is also part of that group, our back end is exactly the same. So front end design from a UX intelligent driving standpoint, that's really going to be the only differentiator between two motor company and Ley Motor Company. And so that creates a lot of power with Huawei. And Neo, I'm sure they're hesitant because number one, these companies might not believe in swapping. They might not believe that it's a viable business for their company. Okay. So it's not just, all right, this is the standard, everybody adopt it. And Neo would generate incremental revenue because they license their IP to other OEMs. And so I don't know how comfortable other OEMs would feel having to write Neo a check every month either.
But I think this year we'll definitely see quite a few announcements
Yeah.
on battery swapping, whether it's the standards, whether it's additional moves, whether these
significant progress. I think
third-party OEMs start to battery swap their vehicles on either the Neo or the CATL platform. And additionally, I think looking forward, there's a couple of announcements from Chang'an and BYD next week, all related to smartification. Because we know that BYD is slightly behind on ADAS, and supposedly there's some big announcement this year coming up.
So they're working with DJI on the intelligent driving, and but they're also hiring their own team.
Yeah.
So how they're going to reconcile that? But I'd said a couple of years ago that BYD is going to democratize intelligent driving, and so but it looks like XPeng is moving towards that end as well, because Brian, when we talked to him, did say that smartification is really going to be a differentiator, so from a binary standpoint, not having intelligent driving, not having smart features takes you out of the market. Having them qualifies you to be in the market, but now whose are better, whose are more customer centric. So that's going to be the most interesting thing, because here in the United States, people are starting to ask me and ask us, hey, what are some of these features that people are so attracted to in China? And
talk about, well, here's the latest one for you. Talk about features. I forget which two companies, maybe one of them is Geely. They have or are starting to integrate DeepSeek into their vehicle.
Yeah, I saw that. Geely. It was Geely.
Geely, right? It was Geely and one other company. So there you go, right? The latest and the greatest. And that's quite geopolitical topic in itself. So referring to
and
right? So
well, but it also points to uh, the competitiveness of the China market and how
Yeah.
you need to quickly integrate new technologies, and AI is going to be front and center when it comes to voice, when it comes to a lot of intelligent driving features now. And I think by the end of this year, level 2 systems are going to be pretty standard across the board for every vehicle sold in
Yeah.
China. So,
Yeah. All right. I don't have anything else.
hey,
But who do you have for the Super Bowl?
oh man, um, I'm an NFC guy because of the Lions, but I'm not a huge fan of
Well,
the
I'll root
Eagles.
for whoever is the underdog, and I believe it's the Eagles.
Eagles, yeah. So
Yeah. And
I'm just hoping that it's competitive.
yeah, and
But
also
the Eagles do have the number one. They do have the number one defense, so I think that's pretty significant. But man, I just wish Joe Lowry and I just wish there was the Bills and the Lions. Let's just say that.
and
So
also a
so
few
disappointing.
ads from I think Jeep is still doing an ad. A couple of ads from
Yep.
Stellantis, an ad from Bosch. Believe it or not.
Actually, really quickly, Lay, we should acknowledge that Jeep has now a new um, global head,
Yeah, that's another.
and Ford reshuffled some of their executives.
Yeah,
So we're starting to see, I believe, more mature strategies to address the US market, the European market, and with Stellantis at least, trying to stop the bleeding. Because if we think about, and we'll end this, but we think about Ford, they were bleeding years ago. Now they're making money. GM last year bleeding. They're writing a $4.5 billion check to kind of reconcile their operations. And
well,
so you
yeah.
go ahead, you give Jim Farley credit
No,
for saying, we don't have competitive products. We're just going to use it as an export hub. More companies need to do that.
I think for the Western automakers, including the European ones, what we've seen the guidance Ford, the guidance is not well for 2025. They're going to lose big money in Model E. I just saw Porsche, their expectation for return on sales this year is 10% to 12%. Now they have a strategic goal of, it's called the road to 20, which means return on sales of 20% long term. And they're only halfway there. Uh, so I think Toyota, I think they believe they gonna do better this year. I think they financially it was okay. Actually, it was pretty good last year. But the Western, the GMs, the Ford, Stellantis, Porsche, Volkswagen Group this year is they're going to be nasty. I think in financially. So
And there's a few different reasons. There's the tariffs, there's the trade war potential, there's um, the China market still continuing to be challenged for every foreign automaker, let alone Chinese EV maker. And we are in real time seeing an industry that you and I have been a part of for most of our lives in transition, in deep reset. And the United States government and the Chinese government are going to play significant roles in shaping what the future looks like from a technology standpoint, from a overall manufacturing footprint standpoint as well.
yeah, and we're still seeing Nissan and Honda kind of battling and figuring out what to do. And Toyota makes a move in China. I think is one snapshot of what you can do, at least in China, what you can do, or what at least you have to try to be different to survive rather than just wait and die. Right?
I think what we see with Toyota is the philosophy of slow and steady wins the race. Okay,
Well, another
they
part of
weren't.
it is Lexus still has a good brand equity in China
Yeah,
compared to right. So and Toyota.
It echoes the Toyota brand. Like, I think Chinese people think it's very reliable, not super exciting, but very reliable.
Yeah.
And you're always going to have sales as long as the belief that this vehicle is not going to cause me challenges and cause me problems and be a money pit. Now, in order to differentiate yourself, but Toyota's always kind of had that reputation around the world, and I don't know how they grow their sales significantly unless they take more risk, but that's not really their MO. But anyways, hey, I
We're good.
know
We're
that
good.
you are in Boston, and I want you to be safe because there's going to be big snow this weekend, you had said.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So
this week we also both had snow days, so our kids were at home.
yeah.
And mine wasn't even a snow day; it was an ice day. There was no snow on the ground; it was just very cold, and the roads get icy. And so the school they canceled school. The school district canceled school. So, anyways, everyone, thanks for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Likewise. Thank you. Talk to you guys next week.
All right.
Let's see.
So you're in Boston, then told the